If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. When the channel reaches 1,000 subscribers, I'll share a surprise story I've prepared especially for you. The midday sun pressed down over the outskirts of a Roman provincial town, the white glare reflecting from broken stone walls and the dusty road that cut through dry fields. The air smelled of heat and smoke, carrying with it the faint clatter of a blacksmith's hammer from the marketplace inside the walls. It was on this road that a soldier appeared, his figure drawing the attention of villagers who stopped their work to watch. His armor was old but serviceable, the bronze fittings dulled from years of use. The red cloak at his shoulder had lost its color to dust and sun. His steps were heavy, not only from the long march, but from the unease of returning to a place where his name was already spoken in doubt. His name was Marcus Aelius Varro, once a legionary who had fought in campaigns along the northern frontier. Wounds and years of service had earned him dismissal, but not honor. Rumors followed him, that he had disobeyed orders, that he had spared enemies when others demanded slaughter. Some believed him reckless, others cowardly, though no one had ever seen him break in battle. His return to this town was not as a hero, but as a man whose loyalty had been questioned. And now, walking beside him, was the reason those whispers grew sharper. The girl at his side walked barefoot on the rough road. She was thin, her arms marked with old bruises and the scars of bindings. Her tunic, once white, had faded into the color of ash, torn at the edges from travel. Her name was Livia, though few cared to say it aloud. Years before, she had been taken as a household slave. Accusations had fallen on her, accusations that she had betrayed her master in some private matter, though no one could speak clearly of what had happened. The punishment had been exile beyond the town's walls, a sentence meant to end her life slowly through hunger or the hands of strangers. But Marcus had found her and brought her back alive, ignoring the decree. People along the road stiffened as they saw her return. Women carrying baskets pulled their children closer. Men at the edge of the marketplace called out, demanding to know why she had not been left to die. Some shouted for the magistrate to be summoned. Others muttered about curses and dishonor. Their voices followed the soldier and the girl, rising and falling like the clamor of distant waves. Inside, Marcus felt the pressure of their judgment, but he kept his face still, his eyes forward. He had made his decision days earlier when he had found her, collapsed from exhaustion, her lips cracked from thirst. He could not leave her then, even if the law demanded it. He told himself it was duty. No Roman should let a body waste away in the open fields. But he knew the truth went deeper. He had lost too much in war, comrades, family, and the sense of belonging that once tied him to Rome. To walk past another abandoned life was something he could not bear, even if it placed him in conflict with his own people. For Livia, every step was heavier than the last. She knew the eyes on her. She knew the whispers. Fear churned in her chest, tightening with each voice that called for her death. Her exile had been meant as a final judgment. To return now under the guard of a soldier was no mercy. It was a danger that placed her in the open, where anyone could accuse her again. She did not understand why Marcus had spared her. Was it pity or some hidden use he saw in her survival? She could not read his silence, and that uncertainty left her restless. The gates of the town loomed ahead, guarded by two men in leather armor with spears in hand. They narrowed their eyes at the sight of the pair. One guard raised his hand, demanding an answer. Marcus gave only a short reply, that the girl was under his watch and that he would answer for her. His voice carried a calm weight, though inside he measured the risk of every word. After a long pause, the guard stepped aside. The townspeople followed with their eyes as Marcus led Livia through the gate and into the narrow streets of the settlement. Stone walls rose around them, broken by small courtyards and clay-tiled roofs. The shadows of awnings stretched across the road, but the heat lingered, pressing down on every breath. Livia's hands trembled as she tried to hide them in the folds of her tunic. Marcus glanced once at her, but said nothing. He knew words would not calm her, nor ease the fear of the crowd. He could only keep walking, guiding her toward the small house he kept near the edge of the town, a house too quiet for one man, and now a house that would soon be divided between mistrust and the faint, uncertain chance of survival. Marcus pushed the wooden door of his house open, and the hinges gave a tired groan. The small dwelling was built from stone and rough timber, a soldier's lodging rather than a family home. The air inside was cooler than the sunlit street, carrying the faint smell of smoke from old fires and the dryness of clay jars stacked against the wall. A single table stood at the center, its surface scarred by years of use. In one corner rested a low bed with a straw mattress. In the other, a clay basin with water collected from the well. It was not much, but it was his shelter after years of service. The girl followed him inside with hesitant steps, her body stiff as if expecting a command or a blow. She kept her eyes lowered, taking in the bare walls and the lack of comfort. For years, she had served in households that, even in cruelty, were filled with fine vessels and embroidered cloth. Here there was nothing of status, only the stripped-down life of a man who lived without company. She wondered what kind of soldier chose such quiet exile, and why he had chosen to bring her here instead of leaving her where she had fallen. Marcus set a loaf of bread on the table, then placed a clay cup of water beside it. He did not tell her to eat, but simply sat down on the bench, his posture straight though fatigue weighed on him. He watched her from the corner of his eye. He could see her hands shaking, the marks on her wrists standing out as she reached for the bread. She broke a small piece and held it as though uncertain if she was allowed. He gave a slight nod, not unkind, and she began to eat slowly. The sight stirred something in him, pity, yes, but also anger at the cruelty of the exile decree. He had carried out many harsh orders in the legions, but he could not remember when the punishment of an unarmed girl had felt just. Outside, the voices of the townspeople could still be heard. Some called for the magistrate to make a ruling. Others muttered that Marcus was disgracing his name. He heard them, but he did not react. He had learned long ago that words thrown by a crowd were wind, sharp for a moment, then gone. What mattered now was the decision he had already made. She would not be left to die. The girl's name still pressed against his mind. He remembered hearing it once when the decree was read aloud. Livia. It was not the name of a criminal, not the name of a conspirator. It was a name like many others in Rome, and that made her punishment harder to accept. He wondered if she was guilty of something hidden, or if she had simply been caught in the politics of a household dispute. Exile, after all, was often used to remove those who were inconvenient rather than truly dangerous. Livia, for her part, was caught between hunger and suspicion. She did not understand the soldier's silence, nor his refusal to send her back outside the walls. She remembered the day of her punishment clearly, the master's accusations, the hurried trial where her voice had not been heard, the order that she should be sent away without food or coin. She had expected death and had accepted it in her despair. Yet now, seated in this bare house with bread in her hand, she felt the weight of confusion. Why had he chosen to risk himself for her? Her eyes flickered up toward him for the first time. He looked older than she had thought from a distance, his face worn by sun and scars, his jaw set in the way of a man used to discipline. He did not look like one who acted from softness, and that unsettled her even more. If he was not a man who pitted easily, then his reason for sparing her was deeper, and she could not yet see it. When night fell, Marcus lit a torch and placed it in a wall bracket. The room glowed with a steady flame, shadows stretching across the stone. He gave her a blanket and pointed toward the corner near the hearth. He would not share the bed, and he made no move that might suggest she owed him anything beyond her survival. She lay down quietly, the rough fabric scratching her skin but still warmer than the earth outside the walls. Marcus lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling beams. His thoughts circled restlessly. He had chosen to bring her back, but he knew the cost. The magistrate could summon him at any time, demand an explanation, and strip him of what little standing he had left. Still, he could not regret the decision. He had lost his family years ago, parents dead, brothers buried on campaign. What he had left was his name, and perhaps that would be taken too. But in that silence, listening to the shallow breathing of the girl in the corner, he felt a strange clarity. He had given her one chance, and that was enough to steady his mind for the night. The first light of dawn entered through the narrow window, casting pale stripes across the stone floor. Marcus rose from his bed before the sun had fully climbed, as he always did, his habits shaped by years of discipline in the legions. He tied his cloak over his shoulder, washed his face in the basin, and stepped outside to fetch water from the well. The streets were already stirring, but eyes followed him with sharper attention than usual. Whispers clung to him, some spoken loud enough for him to hear, others hidden behind hands. They all carried the same suspicion. Why had he returned with the exiled girl? He ignored them, filled his jar, and returned home with steady steps, determined not to give the crowd the reaction they sought. Inside, he found Livia awake. She sat where she had slept, the blanket folded carefully beside her, as if she feared leaving any trace of burden behind. She looked smaller in the daylight, her face thin from years of poor food, but her eyes, dark and restless, watched every movement he made. When he placed the water on the table, she spoke her first words since arriving in the house. Her voice was rough, strained from disuse. "Why did you not leave me?" The question lingered in the air. Marcus did not answer immediately. He poured water into a cup and set it in front of her, motioning for her to drink. Only after she did, her fingers trembling on the rim, did he respond. Because it was not right. His tone was even, but there was weight in the words, as if the judgment was final and required no further explanation. Yet she searched his face, trying to see if there was something more, some hidden motive, some bargain not yet spoken. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the crack of firewood in the hearth. Marcus returned to his tasks, cutting bread, setting out a small measure of olives from a clay jar, making a meal plain but enough to sustain them. He remembered the question that still burned in the minds of the townspeople. What crime had she committed? He did not know. The magistrate's decree had condemned her, but the reasons were shrouded, spoken only in rumor. Some said theft, others betrayal of her master's trust. No clear proof had ever been shared, and Marcus had long since learned that accusations in Rome often grew from ambition or envy as much as truth. Still, the absence of certainty left him uneasy. He wondered if, by protecting her, he had placed himself in the center of something larger than he understood. Livia ate in silence, though she kept glancing toward the door, as if expecting soldiers to burst in at any moment. She thought of the people who had watched her return, their faces sharp with hate, and the memory made her stomach tighten. She knew the punishment for breaking exile could be death on sight. The only reason she still breathed was because Marcus had spoken for her, but she did not know how long his strength could shield her. She wanted to ask him what would happen when the magistrate finally came, but the fear of hearing the answer kept her quiet. As the day stretched, Marcus set about repairing small things around the house, tightening the leather strap of his shield, fixing a loose hinge on the door, patching a crack in the clay roof tiles. He worked without speaking, but not without thought. He considered whether he should take Livia to the magistrate himself and plead her case, but he knew the outcome was unlikely to favor Mercy. Her survival now depended on time. Time for the anger of the people to cool, time for her presence to be less of a threat. Yet he could not deny the weight of responsibility pressing on him. Every action he took bound his name to hers more tightly. That afternoon, someone knocked hard on the door. Marcus rose at once, his hand resting on the gladius at his side. Livia froze, her body tensing as if expecting soldiers to drag her away. When Marcus opened the door, he found two neighbors standing outside. Their expressions carried suspicion, but also curiosity. One demanded to know why he had defied the decree, why he risked the wrath of the magistrate. Marcus met their gaze without flinching and replied with the same words he had given Livia, because it was not right. The neighbors exchanged uneasy looks, then left without further challenge, though their whispers carried into the street. When night fell again, Livia lay near the hearth, but sleep did not come easily. She stared into the fire, listening to Marcus's steady breathing from the bed. For the first time, she allowed herself to wonder if she might survive longer than a few days. She thought of the thin bread, the cup of water, the blanket offered without demand. Small gestures, but to someone who had been cast out as worthless, they carried weight. Her trust did not come quickly, yet a seed of it had been planted. Marcus, awake though he did not show it, listened to the quiet sounds of the house and thought of what he had taken upon himself. He knew the question on everyone's mind. Was she guilty, or was she only a victim of power? He had no answer. But as he drifted into uneasy rest, he told himself he did not need one. For now, it was enough that she was alive, and that was the only line he would not cross. The morning after the neighbor's visit, tension hung in the air like the weight of a storm yet to break. Marcus knew the town would not remain silent for long. Rome's order was clear, exile was final, and those who defied it invited punishment. He could already sense that the magistrate would soon be forced to act, if only to calm the whispers swelling in the marketplace. He told himself he had prepared for this, but as he watched Livia sitting by the hearth with her hands folded tightly in her lap, he felt the uncertainty claw at him. She had been spared once, but the real trial had not yet come. By mid-morning, a messenger boy arrived, his tunic dusty from running. He handed Marcus a small wax tablet marked with the seal of the local magistrate. The summons was brief. Marcus was ordered to appear at the forum by noon, bringing the girl with him. The boy left quickly, unwilling to remain near the house. Marcus read the words twice, his jaw tight, before setting the tablet down on the table. Livia's eyes followed his every movement, her body rigid with dread. She did not need to be told what the message said. She could read its meaning in his silence. Her voice broke the stillness. "They will kill me." She said it without trembling, as if the outcome was already certain and she had accepted it long ago. Marcus looked at her, his expression firm but not unkind. "Not while I stand with you." It was the only answer he could give, but even as he said it, he measured the truth of his words. Could his presence alone turn aside the decree of a magistrate? He was no longer a commander of men, no longer a voice that carried weight in the legions. He was a single soldier with a tarnished name. Yet he also knew he could not hand her over like a piece of property condemned to destruction. The walk to the forum was heavy with watching eyes. Villagers gathered in doorways, their whispers louder now, bolder. Some cursed under their breath. Others pointed, eager to see judgment carried out. A few, perhaps, looked uncertain, but none spoke in her defense. Marcus walked steadily, his stride deliberate, his hand never far from the hilt of his gladius, not in threat, but in readiness to face whatever might come. Livia followed, half a step behind him, her head lowered, her breath sharp and uneven. Each step echoed in her ears like the beat of a drum, counting down to her end. The forum lay at the center of the town, a wide open space lined with stone columns and shaded awnings where merchants sold goods and officials gave orders. On this day, it had become an arena for judgment. The magistrate stood at the raised platform, robed in white with a crimson border, his attendants flanking him. His face was stern, sharpened by years of enforcing Rome's law in a place where order often bent beneath personal ambition. He looked down at Marcus and the girl, and for a long moment he said nothing, letting the murmur of the crowd swell around them. When he spoke, his voice carried across the square. "Marcus Aelius Vero, you have returned with one cast out by decree. You defy the order of this court. Do you deny it?" Marcus stepped forward, his back straight. "I do not deny it." His voice was steady, each word chosen carefully. "But I say the decree was unjust. No charge was proven, no crime was witnessed. She was sent to die without cause." His words drew a stir among the people. Some shouted in anger. Others exchanged looks, surprised that a soldier would challenge the magistrate so openly. The magistrate's eyes narrowed. "You place your judgment above the law of Rome?" The decree was spoken, witnessed, and carried out. To undo it is to weaken authority itself. Tell me, Marcus, why should I not punish you both here and now? The question cut sharp, but Marcus did not falter. He met the magistrate's gaze, his tone low but unyielding. "Because Rome is not dishonored by mercy. Because we are not beasts to cast aside the weak for sport. I carried out many orders in the legions, but I will not carry out one that demands the death of an innocent. If punishment is demanded, let fall on me. My life is mine to give, but hers has already been stolen once. The crowd erupted in noise, shouts of anger, cries of surprise, mutters of discontent. Some called for blood, others seemed shaken by his words. Livia stood frozen, her eyes wide as she listened to Marcus speak, disbelief flooding through her. She had expected silence, perhaps even betrayal at the moment of truth. Instead, he had spoken with a conviction that made her chest tighten with something she could not name. The magistrate raised his hand, and the forum quieted. His expression was unreadable, his gaze flicking between Marcus and the girl. The decision was not given that day. Instead, he declared that judgment would be delayed until the following market day, when witnesses could be summoned and the matter weighed with care. It was both a reprieve and a threat. Time had been bought, but the outcome remained uncertain. Marcus led Livia back through the streets, the noise of the crowd following them like a shadow. When they reached the house, she turned to him, her voice unsteady. "Why risk everything for me? You do not even know if I am guilty." He looked at her for a long moment, then answered with the same quiet certainty he had shown in the forum. "Because no one listened when you try to speak. Until they do, guilt has no meaning." His words settled over her like a weight and a shield both. And for the first time since her exile began, she felt the faintest thread of hope. The days leading to the magistrate's final judgment passed slowly, each one marked by tension and waiting. The townspeople's whispers did not fade. If anything, they grew sharper. Some neighbors crossed the street to avoid Marcus's house. Others lingered near the gate to throw hostile glances or mutter that Rome's order could not be ignored. Yet there were also those who watched with hesitation rather than anger, uncertain if the soldier's defiance was foolish or honorable. Marcus noticed this shift, but he did not speak of it to Livia. He knew the crowd's voice could turn quickly, and the danger was not gone. Inside the house, life found its own rhythm. Marcus rose at dawn as always, carrying water and preparing food. He showed Livia how to grind grain into meal, how to use the small stone mortar to make a simple porridge. He mended her torn tunic with thick, uneven stitches, practical, not fine, and gave her an old cloak of his own for warmth. These were small acts, but they carried weight for both of them. He had not shared his home in years, not since the death of his family, and she had not been treated with dignity since her first day of servitude. The silence between them was no longer only suspicion. It was beginning to hold something steadier, a quiet recognition that survival required both of them. One afternoon, a knock came at the door again. Marcus braced himself, expecting another hostile neighbor, but instead he found an old woman from the next street, holding a clay jar. She explained that her grandson had fallen ill and the family's water supply had run short. For a moment, Marcus hesitated, but before he could answer, Livia stepped forward. "I will take it," she said softly. Her voice carried no fear, only the certainty of someone who knew what it was to suffer thirst. The woman eyed her warily, but handed her the jar. Marcus walked with her to the well, aware that all eyes in the street were watching. Livia carried the full jar back carefully, her arms trembling under the weight. And when she returned it to the woman, she received a quiet "thank you." It was the first word of kindness spoken to her since her exile ended. That night, sitting by the hearth, Marcus asked her if she feared leaving the house with so many watching. She admitted she did, but then added, "If they see me work, if they see I bring no harm, maybe they will stop asking for my death." Her words showed what he had not expected. For the first time, he saw not only a girl condemned, but someone capable of shaping her own place, even under threat. It stirred something in him, respect and a sharper determination to see her survive. Still, doubts lingered. One evening, Marcus asked her directly about the crime for which she had been cast out. She lowered her eyes and explained that her master had accused her of theft. A ring had gone missing from the household, and though no proof had been offered, the blame had fallen on her. She had not stolen it, she said, but her denial had carried no weight against her master's word. Marcus listened carefully, weighing her voice, her expression, the steady way she held herself as she spoke. He had spent years reading men's lies on the battlefield and in the camp. Now he looked for the same signs in her. He found none. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe fully that she had been condemned unjustly. The next morning, he saw the first small shift in the town's treatment of them. The same woman whose jar had been filled greeted Livia briefly in the street instead of turning away. A boy, no older than 10, offered her a piece of fruit at the well. These gestures were few and cautious, but they were real, and Marcus knew that in Rome's provinces, reputation spread through actions more than words. Each step toward acceptance weakened the crowd's thirst for punishment. As the week neared its end, the tension in the household did not vanish, but it changed. Marcus no longer thought of Livia as only a burden he had taken upon himself. She had become part of his daily life, someone whose presence filled the silence that had once been unbearable. For Livia, the fear of death did not leave her, but for the first time she began to imagine that survival was possible, that she might remain here with more than just borrowed days. On the eve of the magistrate's decision, they sat together in the courtyard, the torchlight flickering on the walls. Neither spoke for a long time, but when Marcus finally broke the silence, his words were steady. Tomorrow they will decide. Whatever happens, you will not face it alone. Livia met his gaze, and though fear still lived in her eyes, there was also something else, trust. It was fragile, but it was there. The morning of judgment arrived with the sound of bells calling the town to the forum. The streets were crowded, men and women gathering in groups, their voices low with anticipation. Marcus and Livia walked together, the soldier's stride steady and measured, the girl close beside him, her face pale but determined. The people moved aside as they passed, some whispering curses, others watching in silence, and a few nodding faintly as though uncertain whether to condemn or support them. The week of waiting had not erased the hostility, but it had planted doubt, and Marcus could feel it in the air. At the forum, the magistrate stood once again on the raised platform, his robes clean and formal, his attendants ready with tablets to record the decision. He looked down on them with the weight of authority, but Marcus noticed the faint lines of weariness in his face. This was not the simple matter it had been when the decree was first spoken. Too many eyes were now upon it, too many voices whispering in both directions. The magistrate addressed the crowd first, reminding them of the law of exile and the danger of undermining Rome's order. Then he turned his gaze to Marcus. You defied a decree of this court. You brought back one who had been condemned. You place yourself above the law. Do you have anything further to say before judgment is given? Marcus stepped forward, his voice steady and clear. I do not place myself above the law. I place truth above lies. This girl was cast out without proof, her voice silenced in favor of her master's word. I ask you now, where is the ring she was accused of stealing? Where is the witness who saw her take it? None have come forward. Rome does not demand blind cruelty. Rome demands justice. If punishment is to be given, let it be on me. But do not condemn her again without cause. A stir ran through the crowd. The magistrate waited, then called for any who would speak. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, unexpectedly, the old woman whose water jar Livia had carried stepped forward. She spoke of how the girl had helped her family in need, without hesitation, though she owed nothing. Her words were simple, but they carried weight. Another voice followed, that of the boy who had offered fruit, encouraged by his father to speak. He said the girl had accepted his gift with thanks, not pride. These were small testimonies, yet they broke the silence, showing the crowd that not all saw her as condemned. The magistrate listened without interrupting. Finally, he lifted his hand. This court cannot condemn without proof. The decree of exile was given in haste, and perhaps in error. Let it be withdrawn. The girl will no longer be hunted, nor treated as one outside the law. His words fell into the forum like stone into still water, sending ripples through the people. Some muttered in disapproval, but others nodded, their unease softening. The authority of Rome had spoken, and the matter was closed. Livia stood frozen, hardly able to breathe. For so long she had expected only death or chains. Now, the words felt unreal. Marcus touched her arm gently, guiding her away from the platform as the crowd began to disperse. She looked up at him, her voice unsteady but filled with something new, relief. I don't understand why you did this for me. He met her gaze, his tone quiet. Because I could not watch another life destroyed when I had the strength to stop it. I have lost too much already. I will not lose what I can protect. They returned to the small house together, the road less hostile now, the eyes of the people softer. That evening, as the torches burned in the courtyard, Livia prepared bread and set the table, her hands calmer than they had been since her exile began. Marcus sat across from her, and for the first time, there was no silence of suspicion between them, only the steady comfort of two lives no longer alone. The girl who had once been cast out now had a place within the town, shielded not by decree, but by the respect she had begun to earn, and by the man who had chosen to stand beside her. They ate in peace, and though the world beyond their walls was still uncertain, for the first time both of them knew they would face it not as exiles alone, but as family together.